Digitally Agile Scholarship. This mysterious abbreviation stands for Digitally Agile Scholarship. And what I mean by that is to be engaged in blogging, in using social media such as Instagram, Facebook, Twitter for sharing research and engaging in different new innovative ways of disseminating research. Who is a digitally agile researcher? Here is a sort of a generic description, but to me, Roberta exemplifies a digitally agile researcher, someone who blogs, who is active on social media, and who talks to diverse stakeholders about the importance of science in early childhood education. So you can take a generic description here, or you can be inspired by what exactly these digitally agile researchers do. And there are also several book publications about how to be relevant in the digital era. I have been lucky enough to co-edit one of these books with Oliver Quinlan, who is a former teacher and a very successful digitally agile researcher. So I'll be drawing mostly on the lessons that I learned as we were editing this book together, The Digitally Agile Researcher. It was published in 2017, but as it comes with books, you work on it 2 years before till you see the light of publication. But I do think that it's still very, very relevant with some hands-on tips and ideas, tricks. It has an accompanying website and some free videos from the contributors to the book. So if you want to learn more, feel free to have a look. But how to do digitally agile scholarship? Well, the way the people who contributed to our book engaged in digitally agile scholarship is that they use newspaper articles, blogs, podcasts, videos. They develop MOOCs, they develop free courses, free materials for teachers. It can also be just a free PDF that teachers can download. That too is part of doing something for teachers that is online, openly available, and that summarizes research. Some of them are active on social media, some of them have their own websites, some of them create their own products, apps, toys, they write books for young children. Some of them are so successful that they give TED Talks. So there is a lot of variety and a lot of possibilities. And I'll zoom in on blogs, partly because it's one of the most popular ways of disseminating non-academically and digitally and for free and open access. And partly because that's what I know most of, because I've been blogging since my master's studies. And I'm still regularly contributing to Huffington Post, Guardian, and Psychology Today. So you will know what is a blog. And an academic blog basically means that it's a blog written by an academic, i.e. all the people in this room. They are self-published blogs unless you go to a specific newspaper and you write for them. So then it's reviewed by the editors of the newspaper. But otherwise, you really don't get the sort of peer review that you get with an academic article. So you need to be aware of that. And I always recommend to get a blog read by several colleagues before you post it up to make sure that what you hear in your own mind actually makes sense. And the two key benefits that I see is that writing is really beneficial because it sharpens your own thinking as you are writing. And personally, I love writing. I was told that I write too much, and that is very individual, how much we write and how much we enjoy writing. But it is certainly the case that when you blog and you share your ideas with a larger audience, you get a lot of feedback on your writing, and that too is developing your writing skills because it teaches you what didn't make sense, what you need to explore, and explain a little bit more clearly. Other people say that the reasons that they write blogs is that they see them as an active tool to develop ideas. They can refine their understanding on a specific topic, and they can point to different publications, not just their own, but also other research publications. And as I talked in the first half an hour of my presentation, when you think about the bigger reasons why we engage in impact-related activities, through blogging you can engage in this wider research dialogue. You can make sure that there is less misinformation reported online, but more fact-based information. And make sure that you are part of this very rapidly moving landscape of what is fake news, what are the facts. And it is quite important to what we call curate your own audience. So as you're blogging, people start following you because you engage them in some interesting articles, some interesting thoughts, and you sort of create a community around the work that you are describing. And to do that, I often recommend to ask these W questions. So, what is your story? That's the first thing you need to decide. What is the topic I'm going to blog about? Who is my audience? Is my primary audience, is this blog primarily for teachers or parents or perhaps both? That will, of course, dictate the style of writing, and it will dictate what sort of references or sources you include in your piece. You need to think about when you publish it. There is a lot of activity online happening on Mondays for some reason, but it's always useful to think about publishing something that is related to news stories, because that's when many people pay attention. So you can use the news hook, so to speak. So this and this has been reported in New York Times, but the research perspective is this. And that is how you relate your academic work to something that's reported in media outlets. The question of where to publish, I'll talk a little bit more about the different blogging platforms. But of course you need to ask yourself what will be the best way of disseminating this. And why to publish. I hope that I offered enough reasons. But if nothing else, it really refines your own understanding of your own work. So even if it's just 1 or 2 readers, it's still worth it. And in the orange box, you just see some suggested ways of structuring a simple blog. Now, I should say that this is very different from publishing in peer-reviewed journals, right? So this is a standard editorial letter that you will be used to when you send your work for a research journal. Whereas if you pitch a blog to a journalist, this is a short example that you could use if you were studying children's use of technology. It needs to be something very short, as a pitch. And I let you read the quote by Gemma Ware and Michael Parker, because I think it really summarizes of what is at stake here. So don't assume knowledge, and be patient if they don't understand at first. We are experts in our own work and assume that everyone else will understand this concept, but we really have to explain it or use another word. We really need to try to make it as accessible as possible. So that is about how you do the first step. And then the response, again, is very different from research articles. In research articles, we get a reject or a major or minor revisions, or very rarely straightforward accept. And that's very unusual. Whereas with blogs, it's accept or reject. And the rejection can come from the newspaper editor, or very often it comes from the readers. And I really want to make this clear that if you do engage in blogging seriously and you want to have a community of readers around you, you need to be ready for the fact that there will be many people who disagree with you. And they might disagree in writing and quite heavily. And you need to grow thick skin to be able to deal with those comments. And this is not easy. I struggle with that on a daily basis because there are some people who feel very strongly about children's use of technologies. Some people who believe that we damage children's brains if we expose them to half an hour of iPad use. You know, there are some misconceptions out there that people want to communicate to you very directly, and they use all means possible, Twitter, Facebook, comments on blogs, and they will target you as a person and they will target you as a researcher. So it is something that we all need to be ready for if we want to engage in this conversation. Susan Moore has this lovely quote about how difficult this is. I don't drink gin, but I have many friends, and that really helps, you know. Because if you get these nasty comments, you want to make sure that you have a supportive network of people around you who help you see the fact that this is not about the work, this is about someone attacking you personally, in which case you don't respond. But if it's about your work and it's a constructive comment, so if they say, oh, Natalia, you wrote this, but I read another study that claimed this, then I will respond, because it's about the work, it's about the research. If it's something about me, then I don't respond, because that's just a waste of time. But where to block, that is also related to how many comments you get and how exposed your blogging strategies are. When I started, it was quite small. I didn't have so many readers, so I didn't have so many comments. But as you grow your blogging strategy, you might be approached by some newspapers, some bigger organizations who perhaps invite you to write for them. And that is when you can be asked to write an essay or an opinion piece for these different outlets out there, or perhaps others that are more relevant for your work. You can be also invited to write a guest blog post. And I'm saying you can be invited, but you can also invite yourself. You know, all these are inviting contributions. So I really don't want you to feel intimidated and thinking, oh, these are such big outlets, I have nothing to say. They all have very simple contribution guidelines. And if you go to their websites and you see pitch an opinion article, there is a form to fill out where you put your text, your email address, your name, and you send it to the editors for evaluation. And they decide if they publish it or not. And as we know, there's a reject or accept. And if there's a reject, then you can perhaps send it elsewhere. Scientific blogging platforms, Scientific American, Psychology Today, or the Bold blogs, if you don't know of them, I would really encourage you to Google them and have a look at what others have written about research, perhaps in your area. It's usually a very nice way of summarizing what's happening and how to present it to the general public. I subscribe to their newsletters, so you get maybe once per week a digest of what has been published. And it's a lovely way of knowing what's happening, not just in your own field, but also in other fields that might be inspiring. Now, we are all educationalists, so these are some education blogging sites that I follow and I find interesting. Many of them are maintained by teachers. I'm now talking about this weareteachers.com or Edutopia or Education Week. Someone in the audience said that they have their own blogging site on WordPress. Medium, another blogging site. Very easy to set up your own blog. You just log in with your email address and you can start blogging from day one. WordPress and Medium are the easiest to use and really the ones that have the fewest adverts. unless you have the premium version where you really remove all adverts from your site. And there are also some people who are great to follow. So people who have set up their own websites, and on their own websites they're regularly publishing blogs about their own work and work of others. And there are so many, so I'm just listing my 2 favorites here. And I know that not everyone is from Norway, but these are very important Norwegian education blogging sites where I believe we should try to have our voices heard. Doesn't matter which one you choose, but again, not just to share your work, but also to read others' work is important, to be part of the conversation. I didn't read this book yet, but maybe some of you have. Has anyone read this book? Sociale medier for forskere? No. It sounds very relevant, so it would be good to look it up. And I also heard about Redberg from Bergen, and I found it very inspirational, what's being written on the blog. Same for Monica. And I hope that we can jointly decide who is the key blogger from Stavanger during the break. So there are certainly some academics who are very active on social media and on the blogging sites and so on and so forth. And it's good to ask them how they go about managing their time, how do they find inspiration. Perhaps they invite you to write a guest blog for their own website, and that is how you get the experience and then can co-publish a blog with them. In my experience, these people are very open because they are used to open communication and they enjoy collaborating with others. And also in the short break we talked about enhancing blogs, so adding some pictures or perhaps videos to them. There's also this thing called live blogging, so if someone was a keen blogger, you could be live blogging as I'm speaking and publishing it online. I hope nobody's doing that. But that is possible too, and there are people attending events and conferences and blogging live. Whatever the way you write a blog, it's important to have a good title and some relevant keywords so that people can find your blog, and a title that is engaging and that will stop people and make them read what you write. So think about the title several times and perhaps do the sort of exercise we did just now in the break, that you ask someone else to suggest what your research means. So you read the blog to them and then ask them to give you the title. That usually works for me because I'm not very good at coming up with exciting titles. So just to make sure that I cover this as well in the last few minutes I have remaining. Social media, I have to say that as a private person, I'm not a big fan. In fact, I am on no social media as a private person, but as a researcher, I do think it's important we go where our users are, and many teachers are on Twitter. Many parents are on Facebook, loads of people and many children are on YouTube and Vimeo. And Instagram, perhaps your own institution has an Instagram account where they show pictures of conferences and symposia and different things. Christian Payne has been my own mentor when it comes to engaging with social media for research purposes. And he has this nice quote about tweet not being just a tweet and treating everything we publish on social media seriously because it leaves this digital trace that in the end we need to be responsible for. So do think before you post something. Make sure that we model the practice we would like to see on social media in terms of the level of conversation and the message we send to the wider public. I mentioned that I was at a conference last week and we were actually given a handout with key speakers to follow on Twitter during the conference. So this is not something that I came up with. This is really something we all need to engage with. people are talking about research on Twitter, people are talking about research on Facebook. So if we want to remain current and relevant and know about the latest studies, we cannot just sit in the libraries and hope that it will somehow come to us. We need to proactively search for it. And that is where I turn to your own mirror, so to speak, and want to challenge you that if you think that you have no time for this, to think twice about how you allocate your time, how you prioritize the activities, what you perceive as more important or less important. And if you do believe that this is important, that you strategically plan for it, that you have it included in your plan for publications, that you do a research article as well as a blog, for example. And of course, it's not something that can happen overnight. You need to reflect on this and have some tools for how to make this happen in your PhD or in your research if you're an established researcher. So there are different ways of how you can engage in reflection on what you heard today, what you have seen elsewhere, and definitely face-to-face conversations, as we have the luxury of today, are extremely helpful. I will not do this activity with you, but I would like you to reflect on if you are thinking about your work and public engagement, to try to summarize it for yourself first, and perhaps that can be your strategy for how you choose the tools, whether you engage in blogging, social media, creating apps, or meeting teachers on a daily basis in a community cafe. It really doesn't matter what is the pathway you choose. It's important that you do something that you feel is worthwhile and important for the end users. Or you can just send a short tweet about today. That could be another first step. I started a hashtag Filiorum Conference, so you can follow that if you wish. And I'll leave you with this quote about reflection that is so, so important in our work, and that is really the prerequisite for sharing the important research that you all do. So, tusen takk. Many thanks for listening. Thank you.